What would you do if a judge, who should be imparting justice, humiliated you for the color of your skin and sentenced you without reason? And what if you found out that he was part of a corrupt network manipulating the judicial system? Samuel never imagined that his fight for justice would lead him to face something much bigger, where his life and his family's would be in danger. Could he expose the truth before it's too late? In a small town, where justice seemed to be a game of interests and prejudices, the local court became a stage of tension. A black man, named Samuel, was being judged for a robbery he hadn't committed. The accused was a humble, hard-working man known for his impeccable character. However, the judge, Mr. Lopez, was known for his racism and corruption. He often made decisions that favored the powerful and disregarded justice for those he considered inferior. The room was filled with murmurs. Samuel, standing before the bench, kept his head high, his face calm yet tense. He knew his life could change in an instant, but something inside him told him to stay calm. The prosecution, with their accusation and no concrete evidence, was already gaining ground. The judge, Mr. Lopez, watched from his seat with a mocking smile, as though enjoying Samuel's suffering. "So, you, a man of your race, dare to defend your innocence?" The judge laughed, full of contempt, as he leaned over his desk. Samuel remained silent, refusing to let the judge's words affect him, but his internal anger was palpable. The prosecutor seized the moment to strengthen his case, calling witnesses who had seen nothing, yet claimed to know enough to blame Samuel. The judge, instead of questioning thoroughly, made gestures of complicity with the prosecutor, pointing to Samuel as guilty without any empathy or common sense. It was then that Samuel, in an unexpected turn, stood up and walked toward the judge, who was still mocking him. "Enough!" Samuel exclaimed, his voice firm and full of authority. The murmurs in the room grew, but the judge ignored him, thinking it was just a moment of desperation. "Mr. Judge, your time is up," said Samuel, pulling a document from inside his jacket. The atmosphere changed instantly. The guards became alert, but Samuel continued calmly. "I have been part of a secret investigation into your corruption for years. My name is Samuel Lopez, and I am an agent in the intelligence unit." At that precise moment, he pulled out a device that displayed a live recording, a video showing irrefutable evidence of the judge's involvement in bribery and manipulating cases for his personal gain. The room fell into complete silence. The judge, his face turning pale, tried to deny what had happened, but the evidence was clear. The court members, who had previously been indifferent to Samuel's situation, quickly began to take action. The security officers arrested him, and the prosecutor who had been on his side was also exposed. In that instant, Samuel's anger turned into satisfaction. He knew he had gained much more than his freedom. He had dismantled a system that had oppressed his community for so long. The judge, now dragged down by his own corruption, watched as his world collapsed before his eyes. The truth had come to light, and with it, the humiliation of everything he had done. The court, which had been a witness to so many injustices, was now the scene of a radical change. Judge Lopez was removed from his position, and his name was tarnished forever. Samuel, for his part, not only regained his dignity, but also became an anonymous hero, whose courage and determination had led him to expose the truth in a way no one had imagined. Racism and corruption could not stand in the face of the truth, and Samuel walked out of the court with his head higher than ever, knowing that, though the battle had been difficult, he had left a profound mark on the history of his community. Samuel's case quickly became headline news throughout the city. The image of Judge Lopez, a man who had ruled with an iron fist and disdain, was now circulating in every newspaper and news broadcast. Justice, which had been distorted under his rule for so long, was beginning to awaken with the weight of the truth. But as Samuel walked toward his home that afternoon, something weighed heavily on his chest. Although he had won his freedom, the shadows of the system didn't disappear so easily. He knew the fight wasn't over, that others within the court, the police, and even the prosecutor's office might still be involved in that corrupt network. That night, Samuel received an unexpected call. It was his co-worker from the intelligence unit, Raphael. "Samuel, I need to see you. What you uncovered about Lopez is just the tip of the iceberg," he said urgently. "There's more, much more than you think. There are others within the system who are too involved in this, and some still have the power to stop the investigation." Samuel felt a rush of adrenaline. It wasn't just his life on the line anymore, but something much bigger. With the weight of that revelation, he met Raphael at dawn in a secluded cafe, away from prying eyes. "What you've done has exposed a lot, Samuel, but there's something we can't overlook. Judge Lopez is not an isolated case," Raphael continued as he unfolded an envelope with more evidence inside. "The prosecutor who was with him, the police who let everything happen, they're all connected." Samuel, still processing the magnitude of what he was hearing, nodded. "And what now? How can we stop them? If I've learned anything from all this, it's that these guys don't stop for anything." Raphael looked him in the eyes. "That's why we have to keep going. You know, justice isn't just what we see in the courtroom. Sometimes it's in the shadows and what we don't want to see. But we can do something about it. This is our chance." In that moment, Samuel felt a mix of rage and determination. What had started as a simple defense of his innocence had now become a bigger mission: to dismantle a corrupt system that had infiltrated every corner of the city. Meanwhile, Judge Lopez, still under arrest, was confined to a high-security prison, but he wasn't alone. Others, like him, had fallen, but the network hadn't broken completely. Some of his allies, in their desperation, began to hint that they knew more, that there were hidden pieces of evidence, compromising documents involving more powerful figures in the city. Samuel and Raphael wasted no time. They infiltrated the same judicial network, began working from the inside, collecting more evidence, exposing more secrets. Day by day, with each new piece of evidence they found, the corruption network crumbled further. However, the risks were growing. Fear settled in Samuel when, one night, he received an anonymous letter. The handwriting was firm, but the words were cold. "Stop this now, or you will lose more than just your freedom." The threat was clear, and Samuel understood that the people he was fighting against were far more dangerous than he had imagined. Despite the threat, he couldn't back down. Justice could not fall back into the hands of the corrupt. With Raphael by his side, he pressed on, but the shadow of the threat loomed closer with each passing day. He knew that, sooner or later, he would come face to face with those who wanted to silence him. One night, while walking down a lonely street, someone followed him. Samuel, senses alert, quickly turned and faced his pursuer. It was a tall man in a dark trench coat. Without a word, the man pulled out a phone and showed him a photo. It was Samuel's family. "If you don't stop this now, your mother and brother will suffer the consequences," the man said in a voice as cold as ice. Samuel, with his heart racing but his mind clear, responded firmly, "What you do to me doesn't matter. But if you touch my family, I swear I won't stand by." The man smiled, as though he had already anticipated Samuel's response. "Then get ready for the worst." With that threat, Samuel's story reached its most tense point. But he wasn't willing to give up. The war against corruption had begun, and he would be the one to win it, no matter the cost. Samuel, though fearful for his family's safety, stood firm. The weight of his mission was greater than any personal threat. He knew that if he stopped fighting now, corruption would continue to ruin lives, and his own freedom would mean nothing if it wasn't used to ensure justice. However, the threat he received that night wasn't just a warning, but a clear signal that those involved in the corrupt network would do anything to protect themselves. As Samuel and Raphael's investigation deepened, the pieces of the puzzle started to fit together, but so did the pressure on them. Judge Lopez's allies, fearing they might lose their power, began to take extreme measures to silence the evidence. Samuel and Raphael realized that the lives of everyone involved in the case, including key witnesses, were now at risk. One of the darkest nights, when Samuel arrived home, he found his door open. Fear surged through him, but he couldn't give in. He entered cautiously, only to discover that his mother and brother had disappeared. In their place, a message was written on the wall with blood. "This is just the beginning. Pain and rage coursed through him like a torrent. Now it wasn't just about him. It was about his loved ones. With a mind colder than ever, Samuel made a definitive decision. He would face corruption, not just with evidence, but with the strength of his will. But before moving forward, he needed to ensure the final fall of Judge Lopez. In a final confrontation, Samuel, armed with all the evidence he had gathered, stood before the court, where Judge Lopez was holding his last hearing, trying to salvage whatever was left of his reputation. The courtroom, which had once been his domain, became the stage for his downfall. The judge tried to speak, to defend himself, but his voice trembled, knowing that the evidence against him was irrefutable. Samuel, with a serious face, presented one last live recording, a conversation between Lopez and one of his closest collaborators, detailing the bribery, the trafficking of influences, and how they had manipulated hundreds of cases for personal gain. The judge's words, which had once mocked justice, crumbled in a sea of truths. But as Lopez tried to contradict the evidence, something happened that no one expected. The power of corruption was greater than Samuel had imagined. In a desperate attempt to escape the consequences, the judge played his last card. He manipulated the judicial system, requesting a favorable verdict that could invalidate the entire process. Somehow, he managed to delay his sentence, and the court that had judged him failed to deliver an immediate ruling. What seemed like the end for Lopez was just the beginning of an even fiercer fight. As Samuel prepared for the next phase, he learned, through close sources, that Judge Lopez had struck a deal with even more powerful figures, offering protection in exchange for silence and favors. The final outcome for the judge came when, in an ironic twist, an anonymous call alerted authorities to the location of Lopez's illicit money. As prosecutors dug deeper, they realized that Lopez's corruption wasn't confined to the courtroom. It spread to other sectors of the city. The dirty money he had accumulated over the years caught up with him, and in a desperate maneuver to escape, the judge tried to flee the country. But as expected, his fall was catastrophic. In his attempt to bribe customs officials, he was arrested at the international airport. What started as a trial for racism and corruption ended in a series of even more serious crimes, leading him to a maximum security prison, where he would spend the rest of his days surrounded by the very criminals he had once protected during his career. Samuel, though unable to avoid a bittersweet satisfaction seeing the judge behind bars, knew that not everything was resolved. Justice hadn't fully won. Only one battle had been won. Even though Judge Lopez and his corrupt network were dismantled, Samuel understood that much more needed to be done. The system had to change from the ground up, and he, now a stronger man marked by the scars of his struggle, was determined to lead that transformation. But as Judge Lopez remained trapped in prison, one last reflection lingered in Samuel's mind. Justice doesn't always arrive as we expect, and while revenge may be sweet, it doesn't always heal the wounds left by the fight for truth. If you like this video, you have to watch this one where a racist police officer throws hot coffee at a black woman without knowing she's the mayor. Click now, and we'll see you there. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, and drop a comment.